You have not had water since yesterday. Your mouth feels dry. Your tongue keeps sticking to your teeth. Your head is beginning to ache. And every step through the heat feels heavier than the one before it. Then you see it. A shallow pool beneath a wall of rock. The surface is perfectly clear. Sunlight reaches all the way to the bottom. There is no strange color, no terrible smell, and no dead animal floating in the middle, like a warning sign placed there by the universe. It looks safe. So you kneel, lower your hands into the water, and drink. Nothing happens. You feel better, your headache begins to fade, you return to camp, convinced that you have just solved the problem. Then, 2 days later, your stomach begins trying to escape from your body. That was the danger ancient humans faced whenever they found water. The greatest threats were often invisible. Bacteria did not change the color of a stream. Parasites did not introduce themselves before entering your intestine. A pool could look clean while containing waste washed down from somewhere beyond sight. Ancient human had no microscope, no test strips, no chlorine, no filter cartridge, no laboratory sending a polite message explaining that the beautiful water beneath the cliff was mostly disease with excellent lighting. And yet, humanity survived. By the end of this story, people would be carrying water inside giant eggs, heating it without placing a container over fire, and building wooden wells so carefully engineered that parts of them would survive for thousands of years. But those technologies came later. At the beginning, humans had something much simpler. They had attention. They watched the landscape. They remembered where water appeared. They noticed which sources lasted through drought and which ones made people sick. They followed rivers beneath the sand, read green plants like signs, and built travel routes around places where water could be found. Safe water was not simply discovered. It was learned. And the first lesson was brutal. Natural water was never automatically safe. There were no factories beside prehistoric rivers. No plastic bottles. No fuel leaking into the soil. No pipe releasing suspicious foam while everyone nearby pretended not to notice. But nature had plenty of ways to contaminate water without human assistance. Animals left waste near rivers. Floods carried feces, soil, and decaying material into pools. Carcasses decomposed upstream. Parasites moved between animals and people. Algae could produce toxins. Minerals dissolved naturally from rock. A spring could contain dangerous substances even when the water looked so clean that someone would probably try to sell it today in a glass bottle with a mountain printed on the label. Ancient people were not immune to these dangers. They suffered from intestinal parasites. They developed diarrhea, fever, vomiting, and dehydration. Children, older adults, and already weakened people would have been especially vulnerable. Some recovered. Others did not. This matters because prehistoric survival is often imagined as if early humans had indestructible stomachs. According to that version, our ancestors could drink from any puddle, eat something recently abandoned by a hyena, sleep on wet ground, and wake up the next morning feeling refreshed. That is not toughness. That is fiction. Repeated exposure may have shaped immune responses, and people living in one region may have been more accustomed to local organisms. But familiar bacteria can still make you sick. A strong immune system is not a magical shield that allows a person to drink sewage confidently. Ancient humans survived contaminated water as populations. Not every individual survived it. The people alive today descend from the ones who made it through. That creates a distorted picture of the past. We see the unbroken chain leading to us and imagine the system must have been reliable. It was reliable enough? That is not the same thing. So, people learned to choose between sources. Rivers, streams, lakes, springs, wetlands, rain pools, and seasonal water holes all offered different risks and advantages. Water shaped where humans lived because it attracted almost everything else they needed. Plants grew more densely nearby. Animals came to drink. Fish, birds, shellfish, edible roots, and useful reeds could be found around wetlands. Riverbeds exposed stone, suitable for tools. Mud preserved tracks. A reliable water source was not merely somewhere to drink. It was a hunting ground, road, grocery store, information center, and wildlife documentary, beginning before sunrise, every morning. Unfortunately, the wildlife documentary occasionally included you as the prey. Predators also knew where water could be found. Lions, leopards, hyenas, crocodiles, snakes, and other animals gathered around the same sources. Approaching a water hole required caution. People watched for tracks. They listened to birds. They inspected thick vegetation. They checked the shoreline. They noticed when prey animals suddenly became silent or refused to approach. A pool might save you from dehydration while placing you directly beside something that had been waiting all afternoon for a dehydrated animal to arrive. Water was life. It was also an ambush location. People therefore learned that not all sources were equal. A spring emerging from rock or soil might be preferred over a shallow pool because the water had moved through natural layers before reaching the surface. A flowing stream might be chosen over stagnant water. Cold water without algae, foul odors, visible waste, or dead animals was generally more promising than a warm green pool displaying all of those features at once. But these were clues, not guarantees. Clear water can carry microorganisms. Cold water can contain parasites. A flowing stream can transport contamination from far upstream. Groundwater can contain harmful minerals. Ancient humans were not identifying perfect water. They were reducing uncertainty. That difference shaped the entire story. They did not know which water was completely safe. They learned which water was usually safer than the alternatives. And that knowledge came from consequences. Imagine a group moving through the same region year after year. One spring stays cold during the dry season. One shallow pool disappears soon after the rain stops. One bend in the river becomes foul after herds gather there. One rock hollow provides clear rainwater for several days, then becomes a prehistoric public bathroom for every bird in the area. People notice. The water near the cliff rarely causes sickness. The pool beside the large tree becomes muddy whenever animals pass through. The western spring continues flowing long after the eastern one disappears. The river is safer before the flood than after it. Every source develops a history. Over time, the landscape fills with instructions. Do not drink there after heavy rain. Wait until the mud settles. Dig beside this bend when the river disappears. Follow the ravine toward the hills. The spring beneath the dark rock lasts through the hot season. Those instructions may have been preserved through stories, warnings, repeated journeys, and place names. Before people carried maps on paper, they carried maps inside other people. An experienced elder could know water sources across an enormous territory. A child learned by walking beside adults. Turn when the soil becomes pale. Follow the line of trees. Look for reeds below the ridge. Remember the split rock. Do not stop at the first pool. No one needed to call this geography class. The lesson was the journey. This also explains why ancient movement was not random wandering. Many groups followed seasonal routes connecting known sources of water, food, shelter, and raw materials. A place that supported people during the wet season might become dangerous during drought. A river could shrink into isolated pools. A spring could weaken. A wetland could vanish. The correct response was often to leave before the final water disappeared. Modern people sometimes imagine that moving camp meant a group had failed to settle down. In many environments, remaining in one place until everything nearby was exhausted would have been the failure. Knowing when to move was the technology. The river disappeared. The water did not. In dry landscapes, people learned to look beneath the surface. A riverbed that appeared empty could still hold water below the sand. People could dig into low areas and wait for moisture to seep into the hole. The first water might be muddy. It could be removed or left to settle, while clearer water slowly collected. Rainwater remained trapped inside rock hollows long after a storm passed. Small seeps appeared at the base of cliffs. Tree hollows collected water. Moist soil beneath certain plants suggested groundwater close to the surface. The landscape rarely displayed a large blue sign saying, "Water this way." It offered hints. A line of green vegetation in otherwise dry ground might reveal hidden moisture. Reeds and certain trees indicated that roots were reaching water. Insects gathered around damp places. Birds moved toward drinking sites at predictable times. Animal tracks sometimes converged on springs. This is where survival advice becomes dangerously simple. Follow animals to water sounds excellent until the animal leads you toward a pool where another animal is waiting to eat both of you. Animals also drink from sources that may make humans sick. Some species tolerate organisms that cause serious illness in people. Others obtain much of their moisture from food and may not be heading toward water at all. Birds were not prehistoric navigation satellites. One clue could be wrong. Ancient humans became effective by combining many clues. Tracks, vegetation, terrain, season, soil, clouds, the direction of animal movement, the memory of someone who had crossed the area before. One clue suggested a possibility. Several clues created a plan. Food also contributed water. Fruits, roots, tubers, leaves, and fresh animal tissue all contain moisture. In some environments, people could obtain a meaningful portion of their hydration through what they ate. That did not eliminate the need to drink. Heat, travel, illness, pregnancy, nursing, and physical effort increased the body's demand for water. But food could extend the time between sources. Again, knowledge decided whether this helped or ended badly. Some water-rich plants were safe. Others were bitter, irritating, or toxic. Some roots had to be processed. Some fruits were useful only when ripe. Cutting open a random vine because it looks wet is the botanical version of eating an unfamiliar mushroom because it seems friendly. The landscape rewarded expertise. It punished optimism. Finding water kept humans alive. Carrying it changed where humans could go. A group could not camp beside every river. Water edges attracted predators, insects, flooding, and waste. Hunters and gatherers needed to move away from permanent sources. Children, injured people, and older adults could not always walk to water themselves. Containers broke the connection between the source and the drinker. The earliest containers were probably made from materials that rarely survive. Animal skins, bladders or stomachs, wooden bowls, bark vessels, gourds, large shells, woven baskets sealed with resin, hollow plant stems. These objects decayed, burned, tore, or disappeared, leaving archaeologists with far less evidence than once existed. Stone tools survive beautifully, which creates the impression that ancient people spent their entire lives producing sharp rocks while refusing to invent a bag. They had bags. The bags simply did not survive long enough to receive museum labels. Then, in southern Africa, humans found something close to a naturally manufactured water bottle. It was strong, portable, almost the right shape, and it came from a bird, an ostrich egg. A small opening could be made in the shell. The contents could be removed, and the shell could then be cleaned, filled with water, and sealed. The container was not enormous, but several shells could be carried. They could be taken on gathering journeys, returned to camp, stored, exchanged, decorated, or marked to show ownership. Some communities buried filled eggshells in known locations, creating hidden water stores for later use during dry periods. Think about that. You are walking through a landscape that appears completely empty. No river, no pool, no visible spring. Then someone kneels beside a landmark, digs into the ground, and removes a water container placed there months earlier. The water source is no longer part of the landscape. It is part of human planning. This was a major transformation. Water had become portable. Then it became storable. A hunter could travel farther. A group could place camp on safer ground. Water could be brought to someone who was ill, injured, or too young to collect it. A route could cross dry terrain that would otherwise be impossible. The egg was not just a container. It expanded the map. Carrying water solved distance. It created contamination. A clean source poured into a dirty vessel was no longer clean. Hands, food residue, soil, insects, and repeated dipping could introduce organisms. Ancient people could not see microbial contamination, but they could notice that some storage practices worked better. A covered container kept out dirt. A vessel used only for water remained cleaner than one also used for raw meat, berries, mud, and whatever a child had decided to put inside it. Water stored in shade stayed cooler. Containers could be rinsed, dried, scraped, smoked, or replaced. None of this created modern drinking water. It reduced risk. That is the theme running through the entire story. Not perfect safety, better odds. Water also had to be shared. Someone collected it. Someone carried it. Someone decided how much remained. Children, sick people, nursing mothers, injured hunters, and older adults might depend on others to bring it. When water was abundant, sharing could be ordinary hospitality. During drought, it became a moral and political decision. Who drinks first? How much can one family take? Can visitors use the source? What happens when another group enters the territory? Does a friendship create the right to approach a well during a dry season? Water is biological. Access to water is social. The first water management system may not have been a canal or reservoir. It may have been an agreement. But even carefully selected and carried water could still contain danger. People could remove visible dirt by allowing water to settle. Heavier sediment sank to the bottom, leaving clearer water above. Water could be poured through cloth, plant fibers, grass, sand, or another porous material. That made it look better. It removed insects and debris. It may have reduced some organisms. But clear water was still not necessarily safe water. This is a difficult lesson because human eyes are easily convinced. Remove the mud and the water looks clean. Remove the smell and it seems improved. Place it in an attractive container and suddenly everyone becomes extremely trusting. The invisible threat remains invisible. People also faced a delay between drinking and becoming ill. A person might consume contaminated water and feel fine until days later. By then, that person had eaten several foods, crossed another region, slept in a different camp, and possibly blamed the illness on a relative who had behaved suspiciously near the fire. Cause and effect became difficult to connect. Practical methods mixed with spiritual explanations, rituals, and beliefs. A rule might improve water safety even when the reason given for it was completely wrong. The explanation could fail. The behavior could still help. Then fire changed the equation. Fire could destroy many organisms in water. But there was an obvious problem. Having fire does not mean you can boil water. You need something that holds liquid without burning, leaking, or cracking. Pottery eventually made boiling straightforward, but humans controlled fire long before ceramic pots became widespread. So what do you do when the container cannot survive the fire? You move the fire into the container, one stone at a time. Stones could be heated in a hearth and transferred into water held inside a skin bag, wooden vessel, bark container, or tightly woven basket. The hot stones released heat into the liquid. When they cooled, they could be removed and replaced with newly heated stones. The container never had to sit directly over the flames. This method could heat water for cooking and potentially bring it close to or beyond boiling. It is such an elegant solution that it almost sounds like someone was cheating. The bag burns if placed over the fire. Fine. Put the fire in the bag without the flames. Of course, the process required work. Fuel had to be gathered. Stones had to be chosen carefully because some could fracture when heated. Water had to be carried. The hot stones had to be moved without producing the prehistoric equivalent of an emergency room visit. Boiling enough water for an entire group took time and energy. In dry places, fuel could be scarce. So early humans probably did not boil every mouthful of water. Heating and boiling became more practical only when containers, fuel, fire knowledge, and cultural routines came together. Source selection remained the first defense. Treatment added another layer. Fire made water safer. Containers made that safety possible. Then agriculture changed the problem again. Mobile groups could leave when water failed. Farmers could not easily pick up fields, houses, stored grain, fences, and several increasingly judgmental goats whenever a spring weakened. Settled communities needed reliable water close to home. For most of the story, humans went to water. Then, humans made water come to them. They dug wells. A well required more than making a hole and hoping groundwater admired the effort. The walls could collapse. Surface water could carry dirt into the opening. People needed a way to enter, collect water, and maintain the structure. Some early farming communities in Europe built wells lined with carefully shaped oak timbers. The wood was joined using sophisticated carpentry, creating stable structures that reached groundwater below the settlement. These builders worked thousands of years before modern metal tools. They selected trees, split timbers, shaped joints, planned the structure, coordinated labor, then lowered the pieces into a wet hole where one mistake could bury the entire project. This was not desperate digging. It was engineering, and the purpose was revolutionary. Water no longer had to be found on the surface. It could be accessed beneath the settlement. But wells introduced new dangers. Waste placed nearby could contaminate the ground. Animals could enter the opening. Floodwater could carry surface material inside. A dead creature falling into a well created a problem visible enough that even germ theory was unnecessary. The well needed protection. Rules developed around its use. Keep animals away. Do not leave waste nearby. Cover the opening. Maintain the lining. Control who draws water and how. The more humans controlled water, the more water required collective responsibility. This entire system reveals something important. Ancient humans were not searching for water only after becoming desperately thirsty. By that point, the body was already weakening. Judgment declined. Movement became harder. People became more likely to make bad choices, including drinking from the first attractive puddle available. Effective groups planned before the crisis. Routes connected known sources. Containers were filled before departure. Camps were chosen according to distance from water. Seasonal changes were watched. Backup sources were remembered. An elder might decide to leave because a spring sounded weaker, plants were drying earlier, or animals had changed their movements. That was not a reaction to thirst. It was the management of uncertainty. A spring could fail. A flood could contaminate it. A drought could continue longer than expected. Another group could already be using the source. A container could break. Someone might become sick and require more water. One remembered source was useful. Several were survival. This made shared knowledge more valuable than any single strong person. If only one individual knew the route, that knowledge could disappear when the individual died. So children learned. They followed adults. They carried smaller containers. They heard warnings. They watched where people dug. They learned which plants meant moisture, which tracks led to water, and which beautiful pools should never be trusted. They made mistakes, while experienced people were close enough to prevent those mistakes from becoming final. That was education. Not education separated from survival. Education as survival. Return now to the clear pool beneath the rock. You are thirsty. The water looks perfect. You begin to kneel. An older woman stops you. She points to the line on the stone where recent floodwater reached. She shows you the animal tracks gathered along the edge. She remembers that several people became sick after drinking here during the last warm season. Then she turns away. You follow her uphill. The climb feels unreasonable. Your mouth is dry. The pool below is still shining in the sun, looking clean, cool, and deeply offended that no one trusts it. At the base of another rock face, water emerges slowly through a narrow crack. The spring is small. It is not dramatic. It would not look impressive in a photograph. But the group knows it. They know where it comes from. They know when it flows. They know how long it lasts. They have used it before. You drink. Then you study the route back. The split rock. The pale soil. The line of trees. The narrow ravine. One day, someone younger will follow you. That is how ancient humans found safer water. Not because prehistoric rivers were pure. Not because ancient immune systems were invincible. Not because animals always led people toward a perfect spring. Humans watched. They remembered. They moved with the seasons. They dug beneath sand. They gathered rain. They carried water inside skins, gourds, baskets, shells, and giant eggs. They allowed mud to settle. They filtered debris. They moved fire into containers using heated stones. Eventually, they dug wells and brought groundwater closer to their homes. Every new technique reduced uncertainty. But the most important technology was the one connecting all the others. Collective memory. The landscape became a library. Every spring was a page. Every drought was a lesson. Every illness was terrible information. Every route was passed to someone younger. Today, you turn a handle, and clean water appears inside your home. The river is hidden. The reservoir is hidden. The treatment system is hidden. The pipes are hidden. Thousands of decisions take place before the water reaches your glass, and the system works so well that you rarely need to think about any of them. Ancient humans could not afford that kind of ignorance. They had to know where water lived. They had to know when it moved. They had to recognize the traces it left behind. The first human water system was not built from pipes. It was built from attention.